what a privilege it is to be able to speak here. People who talk to me know I say this too much, but I mean it. I'm incredibly proud to work at a place like this, and I'll give you 2 reasons why. Those are my 4.5-year-old twins, and you're thinking, what do the twins have to do with what you do here? Well, first of all, baby girl there, she's a boss girl, and she looks at me every day sternly and says, "Do great today, Daddy." And I say, "Okay, baby, I will." And then when I get home, my son always asks me if my boss gave me a good report card or not. But again, what does this have to do with the Institute? And the reason is when I come to work each day, I know from the bottom of my heart that I'm surrounded by people who are making the world a better place for my kids. So it makes me incredibly proud to work here. But I work here, obviously, maybe I'm biased, so what would be maybe an objective heuristic of what makes a good career? Neil Pasricha is the author of the book, The Happiness Equation, and he came up with 4 S's on what makes a fulfilling career. And I could spend an entire talk on each of these and how I think these are all fulfilled here. But social is the idea of just having friends at work. Stimulation is that you're always learning. Structure is having a schedule, a reason to wake up in the morning. And story is arguably the most important, and this is being a part of something that's bigger than yourself. So for the last little bit of time here, I'm going to share with you one of my stories. And as it was alluded to, it's about osteoporosis, but the reality is it's actually much bigger than that, and it's about what can happen because of osteoporosis, which is bone fracture. And in fact, bone fracture can happen even if you don't have osteoporosis. So, gosh, there's probably 150 people in this room today. Statistically, 45 of us are gonna have a major fracture event after the age of 65. And these are gonna be probably in the hip or in the spine. So if you look to your left and right, statistically, one of you is gonna have a major fracture event. Yikes. Why, I don't know why we're laughing. But the hip in particular is incredibly nasty. 50% of people who have a hip fracture don't walk again, and 20% actually die within a year. And there's a whole constellation of reasons on why that is. But it's a major, major problem. So what do? Well, as an engineer in this field and for an orthopedic clinician, the idea is to identify the people that are at risk for a fracture. So the ability to have someone come into your clinic and I can say, if you fall, you are likely to break your hip. That's what we want to be able to do. So how do we do that? Well, the gold standard today, maybe some of you have had this before, this is called a DEXA scan. This is basically an x-ray image of how much bone you have. And so what you're looking there is the hip, maybe, does this work? Oh, there we go. So this region right here is called your femoral neck. And this is the part that connects into your pelvis. And this is the most susceptible area for fracture. So what we do, the royal we, is we look at how much stuff you have in your femoral neck. And the way we decide that is if it's brighter on the image, it means there's more bone there. If it's darker, there's less bone. So again, we just look at that area and we just simply say, how much stuff do you have? And then we give you what's called a T-score, which compares the amount of bone you have to a healthy young adult. So if you have a positive T-score, you have more bone than the average healthy adult. If you have a negative T-score, you have less. If you have slightly less, you're gonna be in that yellow zone, and we call that osteopenia. If you have a lot less bone than an average individual, you're in the red, and we call that osteoporotic. Unfortunately, if we use this information alone, I will correctly guess for less than half of you if you are at risk for fracture. So I said 45 of us are at risk. Maybe, at best, I can say, ooh, I identified 20 of you. 25 I did not identify. On the other hand, I might say you are at risk for a fracture when in reality you're really not. And then you might be prescribed medications that perhaps you didn't need. So on both ends of the spectrum, our ability to assess fracture risk is quite poor. And the reason really is that bone is incredibly complex. There is such a unique microstructure that makes up bone. And in fact, every one of us has a different fingerprint, so to speak, of what our bones actually look like on the inside. And again, there's so much information here that summarizing it with a simple T-score is just, it's insufficient. So what if you had a 3-dimensional scan, like a CT scan? Well, you see that blue plane there. I'm gonna be showing a lot of images that look like this. Just know they come from a 3D scan. Well, here is one such planar image. But again, what am I supposed to do with this data? Well, now instead of looking at a 2D projection, I can look at the whole volume of your femoral neck, and I can say again, how much bone do you have? And we come to the same conclusion. It's not that great at predicting fracture risk. And I have to emphasize the reason is because your bones really look like this. They are incredibly complex, they have a unique microstructure, and it's the way they're built that determines how strong the bone is. Not necessarily how much stuff is there, it's how it's built. So here's what we want to do. Here's the problem. On the bottom of your screen, you're seeing some numbers there. The lower that number, the better the resolution, the more I am able to see. If you go into a clinic, at best, you're going to get a 300 micron resolution. Again, higher number, less resolution. As a biomechanist, as an engineer who does computer modeling, as another side of what we do, if I have the image on the right-hand side, I can quite easily, in fact, make a computer model that's physics-based of your bone with that information there, and I can say with a high degree of accuracy, I could say, well, if you're subjected to these different types of falls, what is your risk for fracture? And again, it's really reliant on having all of that information. The thing is I can't get this in a clinic. And the reason is because the radiation required to get that kind of resolution, it's much too high, it'd be too dangerous. So it's not even a question of whether I can get that in a clinic or not. I have to use what's on the left. So keeping with the theme of artificial intelligence, what we decided to do was come up with a way to teach AI to take an image or images that make up a CT scan, like that on the left, and actually predict what the micro CT or benchtop image would look like. And so what you're seeing there in the middle is, in fact, an AI-rendered prediction of what that microstructure really looks like. And again, I have to emphasize now, if I have that information, again, quite easily, we can make computer models of that bone and subject it to any types of falls, sideways fall, a fall on your knee, a fall forward, a fall backwards. And I can say, look, if you fall on your knees, believe it or not, you have a very, very high risk of fracture. So how well does it really do? If we zoom in a little bit, again, that's the femoral neck. That's a very important area for fracture. So that is what the clinical CT would look like if you zoomed in on that femoral neck in that square. This is what our super resolution is predicting. This is what the ground truth, so to speak, or what a benchtop scan would get you. And it's kind of hard to compare the two, so what I've done here is I've overlaid the prediction blue on top of the actual bone in white. And you can see we're actually recovering that microstructure really, really well. So again, with that information, I can model the bone and I can say exactly how strong it is, which has huge implications for actually assessing if you're at risk for fracture or not. So we've been able to go from 300 micron to 50. Again, higher number, poorer resolution. What we're currently working on is using even lower resolution data, which would be 500 micron, and try to predict, again, what the 50 micron would look like. And if we can do this, which we're quite confident we can, we actually unlock a huge opportunity. Every year in the United States, and this number grows year by year, but right now it's about 80 million CT scans are given every single year. Those CT scans look like this, and the reason is a lot of individuals get scans for abdominal issues, if they have obstructions, or if they are doing a pre-cancer screening, lots of different reasons to get a scan that looks like this. There is a ton of bone data in that scan that we just simply don't use because there is really no use for it unless there's a really glaring issue that we can make out. But wouldn't it be cool if those 80 million CT scans we're administering, we could just opportunistically apply this idea of super resolution and say, hey, you came in for obstruction, good news, you don't have one, also good news, we processed your bones, we identified some early weaknesses, and now we can do something about it. So what do we do about it? I've kind of explained a little bit of some of the things we're doing to help you, but if you get nothing from this talk, which is fine, it's been a long morning, please take this home. This is what you can do for yourself, and I promise you this is better than anything I could tell you, anything I could do for you, anything anyone else could do for you. The best thing you can do for your bone health, and some of you might know this, is to weight lift. Bones are incredibly adaptable. If you use them, they become stronger. If you don't use them, they become weaker. This is an issue in space travel, because once you lose your gravity, you don't actually load your bones anymore, and you start to get a tremendous amount of bone loss. But on the other end of the spectrum, if you put weights on your bones safely and under supervision, you can grow your bones to be quite strong. Also, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not gonna stand up here and tell you what supplements you should and shouldn't take, but there probably are some I would recommend, and maybe I would tell you some that I have my parents taking. But again, this is the best thing you can do for yourself as you age. And the truth is, we're all gonna fall. It's just a reality right now of life. As we age, we're gonna fall. And so really, we need to build strong enough bones to prevent these catastrophic bone fractures. So I opened up with this, what makes a good career? And again, I could spend all day talking about each of these and how I think it's fulfilled here. So I think our friend Neil missed one S. Thank you.